suboptimal from the Sixers standpoint.
That's a nice way of putting it in a lot of words, but yeah, it was bad from the Sixers' point of view.
So, who impressed you more, Pascal Siakam or Kawhi Leonard?
Kawhi Leonard, like, that's a pretty tough question. Like, we're talking two wonderful performances, but Kawhi didn't just look like an MVP player or the best player on the court in Game 1. He looked like the best player in the world, and that's a bigger discussion. But with LeBron James out of the playoffs now, there is that vacant title for what you want to call it, the best player in the world. And Durant's doing his thing out west, but out east, what Kawhi's done through his first 6 playoff games has been astounding, and I think we saw that come to full fruition on Saturday night, and he just delivered a masterpiece at both ends of the floor. I remember we were talking post-game between us how he just looks so slow and methodical, and the game is just, it looks like it's in slow motion, and it looks like he's just chilling out there. But you look up and he's just being lethal from the mid-range, just knocking down the shots and playing the elite level defense on the other end. So not to take anything away from Pascal, because he was a tremendous performance and he's a tremendous player breaking out in these playoffs as we're seeing it.
Yeah.
But what we saw from Kawhi, I don't think there's any player that can stop what we saw on Saturday night. And secondly, if he does that a couple more times, this series is over. I think we can look at adjustments, we can look at schemes, we can look at Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. But if you get that from Kawhi 2 or 3 times, you're going to win every game that happens. And this is going to be a short series if there's a repeat of that.
Yeah, he just seemed completely unfazed by anything that Sixers defenders did to him. You can't even say that they caught the Sixers in rotations, created breakdowns on defense. There really weren't any breakdowns because he didn't require a breakdown. He would just... He was unfazed.
Well, that was the thing. At the start of the game, there was no breakdowns. He was hitting contested shots, and while Jimmy Butler kind of got the brunt of the blame for his defense in that first quarter, I think the Sixers' defense on him early was quite good. Pascal, not so much. But on Kawhi Leonard, there were guys there, there were hands in his face, and yeah, it wasn't perfect, but it was still pretty damn good. And then as the game wore on, you could see that the Sixers were getting frustrated, and they did start dropping their heads a little bit.
Yep.
And that's to be expected when you've got someone hitting the type of shots that he was hitting. And we just sat with Jimmy Butler 30 minutes ago, and Brett Brown said the same thing about how they were playing good defense. They were hands in his face, and we're not talking small guys. We're talking Ben Simmons is 6'10", Jimmy Butler and Tobias is 6'8". So these are comparably sized guys that were in his space, in his shooting pocket, and he was just rising up and hitting these shots. So you're right, the Sixers schematically didn't do a lot wrong early. As the game wore on, they sort of got annoyed, and you could tell that the defense started slipping and the game started to get away from them as they were trying to not just tread water but elevate uphill. But there's something for the Sixers to build on, but yeah, they need to hope that Kawhi comes back to earth a little bit, and I think the key is going to be just mixing up the coverages that you see on him. In a funny way, his performance reminded me of what Dirk did to OKC back at the start of this decade in the Western Conference Finals, and I know that they're not entirely different players. Dirk is a much better shooter than Kawhi is, but during that series, OKC just didn't have an answer to him. They had Durant on that team, they had Serge, they had Ibaka, but just one-on-one matchups, it didn't matter what they did, and Dirk was able to get his shots, and that's kind of what happened with Kawhi on Saturday night. And I think a key for the Sixers is just mixing it up as much as they can. I know the Raptors are a good shooting team, but they're going to have to bring help from somewhere. They're just going to have to try to junk up the game, a little bit, and see if they can just disrupt Kawhi's rhythm.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to have to bring help, and it's really just a question of where the help comes from. I think when you look at the Raptors' effectiveness, and Brett Brown has talked about this since Marc Gasol has joined the team, they're the #1 3-point shooting team in the league. However, if you really look at where they shoot well from, it is in the corners and above the break, but not at the top of the arc. I think they're going to have to bring help off of Gasol and hope that he doesn't beat them from 3-point range. I would not be shocked at all to see him shoot 10 threes tonight, because I think that's where the help has to come from. They have to sag off and hope he doesn't destroy them, or they have to hope that Kawhi doesn't get in his pocket again like the other night. And I think they're gonna start with that. I think we just talked to Brett, and there's there's a tolerance level for how long he can live with man defense before he has to try some gimmicks.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the Raptors only scored 105 points, I think it was 108, but it was something around then. And the first half of defense looked really bad from the Sixers because the Raptors hit a lot of shots. But in the second half, the Sixers only gave up 46, 47 points, something around that mark. So the defense is a problem, but I think if I'm the Sixers, the biggest thing that I need to focus on is getting some more scoring and shot creation at the other end, because if you bake into the cake that Leonard's not going to shoot so well again tonight, and the same from Leonard, that's going to bring some regression down, and you can probably live with the defensive performance holistically while we're talking about things they can improve. That seems to be stuff that the Sixers can control, and if you hope that the Sixers defense draws a little bit better, I suppose, shooting percentages coming down for the Raptors, then you can live with it. At the other end, they've got to try to generate more offense, and while Joel will almost certainly play, the fact that he's battling gastro, that just doesn't, it's just one more thing that sort of adds, I suppose, reduces, the ceiling of this team an extra 2 or 3%, and we're talking about the lack of continuity. And Jimmy Butler was talking then about him knowing when he has to take over games and assert himself and take shots. I think we need to see a bit of Jimmy Butler game offensively tonight as well, because you look at the offense they got in game one. JJ really exploded it and got his 15 points in the third quarter, so that's what you need from JJ. James Ennis came off the bench and really gave them a spark in the first half. Tobias was hitting some shots in the first half, and I thought Ben's offensive game was quite solid considering that he is going up against someone like Kawhi. But the biggest thing missing out of all of that was a big Joel Embiid game, and obviously if Joel goes off, then those other guys aren't going to have as much to do. But I'm a little bit concerned that the Sixers can score enough to keep up with the Raptors team regardless of what they're doing on offense, because we saw on Saturday night that the Sixers have individual shot creators, but the Raptors have individual, I suppose, defenders for those players, and when that first pass and that first, I suppose, offensive flow is taken out, the Sixers will be just backing up and going isolation on offense. They've been talking for 2 days about trying to get more ball movement from that second and third rotation, and that's easy said and done. But against this Raptors team, it's going to be hard for them to do that, because the Raptors are, as we talked about on Saturday morning, an elite defensive team, and they're prepared for what the Sixers are bringing to them.
Yeah, and we talked about it before the series. We said that to win the series, you're going to have Jimmy Butler and Joel Embiid play like Hall of Fame players, and those are maybe the Raptors agreed with that assessment and took those two away, and they did a fantastic job. The two of them probably shot 28% combined from the field on they probably took over 30 shots. Both of them were not their usual selves, and Jimmy Butler, to me, his decision making was really questionable. He didn't seem, when I asked him that here after shoot around, he seems to think that he was just playing his game. To me, it was head scratching. The decisions, both the shots that he decided to take and the shots he decided not to take, were both head scratching to me.
I think we'll see a lot more tonight about whether that's a one-game sample or it's a trend that's going to define this series. My gut tells me it's probably going to be something that is more of a trend that's going to mean the series doesn't go past 5 games, 6 games max. But the Sixers get a do-over tonight. If they come out and win this game, all of this discussion we've had today and for the past 3 days, it goes away, because then they're 3 home games away from the conference finals. But if they come out and look, and inept isn't the right word, but I think overmatched is probably a better word, and offensively challenged, then there's a real problem. And even when you talk about Joel Embiid having a below average game, and same with Jimmy Butler, for mine it wasn't anything overly sexy or advanced that the Raptors were doing schematically. It was just a personnel-based thing. You've got Marc Gasol on Joel Embiid. I think the minute Serge Ibaka comes into the game, the offense has to run through Joel on the low block and just try to rack up fouls, not just to get Serge Ibaka in foul trouble, because that's not really going to be that controversial and too much of an issue for the Raptors, but just getting the team into the bonus, like we talked about in Saturday's preview. He can draw fouls against Ibaka, and that's an advantageous matchup. And we can talk about mindset, we can talk about aggression, we can talk about all these things, but the Raptors have, as we've been saying, really clear matchups for the best players on the Sixers, and we've said all year the Sixers look their best when Joel is dominating, Ben is getting downhill, and Jimmy can pick up and get the scraps inside, I suppose. We saw in game one that the Raptors took away Joel. Ben had a good game, as I said, but this isn't a series for him where people can talk about wanting Ben Simmons to lower his shoulder and get to the rack, but that's not going to work against Kawhi Leonard. You're going to score 1 out of 3 times if you're lucky doing that. So if Ben starts doing that, I think that's a bad sign for the offense, and how we play on today is good and what you want to see from him. You just need more from Jimmy, you need more from Joel, and I think they need to try and get more shots for Tobias as well, whether that's more pick and roll or whether that's more weak side action. I want to see Tobias get more action and more shots and get more involved in his offense. Because while Danny Green and Kyle Lowry are still plus defenders, if you're looking at matchups on the Sixers offense that are probably more advantageous to the team, I think Tobias Harris attacking those guys you've got a better chance of scoring points consistently than Ben going at Kawhi, or probably even Joel going at Marcus Gasol just for the fun of it.
Yeah, I agree, but I'll say the one thing they did try to do, and we actually haven't talked with them much about this, was they tried to take Kyle Lowry down low and exploit him in the post, and he was fantastic down there. Drew a couple of offensive fouls, he got a couple of turnovers. I mean, he is not a weak spot. He is not a mismatch that they can exploit, and I think they hope that he was. It's tough across the board.
Well, I think with him, he's got a fat ass, which is a compliment and a good thing, and makes him a good post defender. And I agree. I want Ben in the post as much as possible, but he doesn't have refined post moves at this stage. He's still young, and it's just a bully ball game. And you're right, Kyle Lowry is smart, he's stocky, he knows where to get in positions, and we've seen it time and time again throughout NBA history that if you've got an undersized defender, if he's got that bulk in his waist and his legs, he can stand still and I suppose just block off these stronger opponents.
Yeah.
And then if the opponents don't have the advanced post moves, the footwork and the counter to that, then it's not going to end well. I get flashbacks to Chris Paul defending LeBron and Durant in playoffs past, and he did a really good job because those guys were still learning their counters and really getting those playoff rips under their belt, and that's where Ben is. So I agree, I don't want to see Ben posting up Kyle Lowry for the sake of it. I think with Kyle Lowry, he's going to be either JJ or Tobias. I think you want him running around as much as possible. If it's JJ the matchup, I want JJ doing shuttle sprints up and down the court and across the court, and making Kyle Lowry work. And yes, Kyle Lowry can keep up with him, but make him feel your presence, pick him, rub him, shoulder him off the ball, and just try to wear him down a little bit, and hope that is more of an advantage for quarters 3 and 4. And I suppose put in that effort early and hope that pays dividends on the back end.
Yep. Any thoughts? What's your sense? Does game 2 go like game 1? Do we see? I think it's just as likely that the Raptors win this easily, but in a very different way from game 1. Look, 10 hours from now, this will seem silly what we're saying, but for me right now, I think we'll know pretty early on whether Kawhi is comfortable again, and if he is, then I think things they're gonna have to gamble, they're gonna have to help, and things could really get ugly after that.
So I expect the Sixers to come out strong, and if we forget the first quarter, they played pretty well on Saturday night. If it wasn't for the explosions from those two offensive players in Siakam and Leonard, who had 34 combined points in a quarter, that's not going to happen again. So I expect the Sixers to come out strong. They will be, I know it's one of those mental things, but I think they're going to be hungry, they're going to be into it, they're going to be engaged. And I expect it to be a tight game for the first half. Where I think the series is going to shine through and where this game is going to be telling is in that third quarter. Once the Raptors have seen any adjustments, and once I suppose the hype and the energy of that start the Sixers I think are going to have wears off, what does the third quarter look like, and what does the Sixers starters versus the Raptors bench look like, for instance, or when Brett Brown subs out his starters midway through the third quarter and the Raptors leave their starting 5 on the court, can the Sixers find enough offense, defense, whatever it is, to tread water in those minutes? I think that third quarter is where we're going to determine what happens tonight. I'm with you. My gut tells me that the Raptors win again tonight because I just think they've got too much, I suppose, specific talent within this matchup. If you're doing 2K rosters, then the Sixers have as much talent as the Raptors, but when it comes to actually implementing that into a game, cohesion and we're talking about Joel versus Mark, for instance. Joel's a better player, but Mark is a near perfect matchup for Joel and stuff like that.
He neutralizes exactly what he does well.
Exactly. So I think the Raptors win tonight, and we're going back to Philly 2-0 because I think when push comes to shove and it really gets into that close game atmosphere, if we have that late, or if not that third quarter that I'm talking about, I expect the Raptors to show that cohesion to begin with, and I just suppose those advantages with those key matchups will shine through, and Toronto will win again tonight. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I don't think it'll be crazy, but I kind of think it might be one of those Boston Philly games from last year where it's close and it's just the Raptors grind it out, and we'll look back after the fact and we'll point to some maddening Sixers turnovers or a couple of big shots they missed in a few positions that went against them. But the big picture 10,000 foot takeaway is that the Raptors are a very good matchup in terms of stopping what the Sixers want to do.
I will say it's not all doom and gloom. For us, it's a little doom and gloom. We are recording this obviously in a lobby. There's a lot of people working.
We're trying to have a good life and live on Monday, and we're just poking videos out.
We're poking videos out. We intended to do this on the floor, but Jimmy Butler and Ben Simmons stayed behind. The team buses have already gone back to the hotel, but those two stayed behind and are out on the floor shooting, so we didn't get access to the floor yet. So we're here in the lobby.
Not quite as fun.
Not as fun.
The views aren't as great.
No. But those guys are out there working, so they're not hanging their head and putting their tail between their legs. So there's something there. Joel's got stomach flu, so he was not at shoot around.
Bad poutine for Joel last night.
Is it? You think it was the poutine?
I will blame it on that. A good friend of mine from Canada was just messaging me before and said, let's just blame the poutine. So I hope not for Canada's sake, but who knows what Joel was eating last night.
Yeah, maybe he's a little lactose intolerant, but he can't be because I hear he drinks 4 milkshakes before a flight.
Joel's just living his best life. Doesn't
He
matter
really,
what basketball court. He's living a good life.
He really is living the dream. Okay, so we will see tonight. Game 2, 8 o'clock. I wish we could have given you some obvious keys. Let's say you get a 30-point JJ night. You get a 30-point Tobias night, and Jimmy Butler turns it on and becomes, the best version of himself. Then everything could look very different in 10 or 12 hours, whatever time it is.
And that's the beauty of the playoffs, right? The Bucks were embarrassed yesterday. The Sixers got beat down on Saturday night, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
When we look back at NBA championship sides and NBA final sides, they win these game 2s when they're down 1-0 on the road, and I think that's the coolest part of the playoffs. We'll see what the Sixers have and whether they actually can make a finals run like they want to this season. And I know we doubt it. Brett Brown said just then about how nobody in the media is picking them to win this series, but at the end of the day, we don't count. We don't matter. It's just whether they can go out there and do it, and let's go find out tonight.
Clearly, he said 0 of 6 Philly writers picked them, and I was
0
like,
Australian writers as well.
Who are the 6? I don't think I was one of those 6. Well, 1, I know I wasn't because I didn't pick this series. And 2, I'm like, 6. There seems to be a lot more of us. I guess you're only counting 6. So, if he was offended, I'm also offended.
Deep down, coaches love that stuff.
They love a little bit of
and if they lose, then it doesn't matter. But if they win, he can point his finger out like Nelson off The Simpsons and just laugh and make us feel bad about doing. Well, we don't know anything, right? We just guess.
What's your take on his job security? Like, you've been around the team all year. Like,
tell me in a week's time. Look, I don't think anyone, whether you talk about Phil Jackson, Red Auerbach, Eric Spoelstra, pick a coach. No one, I don't think, could take what's happened this year and turn that into a championship side. I just don't think it's possible to simulate the season like a 2K game and expect to win that. So, do I think he should be under serious jeopardy? Not for what happens this postseason. If people have qualms with Brett about his plays or his management or all that sort of stuff, then maybe I'm willing to listen to that. But I don't want this postseason run being used against him because, simply put, the Raptors are a better team than the Sixers are. Not individually talented, maybe, but as a team, I think the Raptors are a better team. So, personally, I think he should be back next year. But to your point, if they get swept or lose in 5 games, is going to be a very loud few days and a very nervous few days, because I obviously have only been in the city for a year, but I get the sense that there's a loaded gun pointed at Brett's head, and I think some people in charge are just looking for a reason to pull the trigger. So I hope I'm wrong with that. I hope the Sixers can get a few more wins and extend the series out and make it competitive, because I think that should be enough. But if it's a 4 or 5 game series, then yeah, the day that they're eliminated, there's going to be a very loud 48 hours to see what happens.
My question there is, like, what's the value? Is it just you're trying to continue to feed hope, and if you're stuck as far as the roster, it's one thing you can do is change the coach. What exactly would that accomplish?
Well, that's a valid point. We see it time and time again. As much as Brett is very close with the owners, from what we see, and cool with Elton Brand, what's almost a guarantee within NBA circles that when a new GM comes in, the incumbent coach is under serious jeopardy, and unless something crazy happens or crazy success follows, then getting rid of the head coach is the easiest thing to do for a GM, because it buys him a couple more years, it takes the pressure off him, and it shifts the blame onto the head coach. And whether it's right or wrong, I think that's a separate discussion to whether it's just a fact of life in the NBA. But then again, let's just see what happens tonight, because if they win tonight, go home to Philly, then they just have to win 3 games and then the conference final. So yeah, I think I agree with the fact that there could be some job security questions, but it's going to be determined over the next week.
There you have it. Thanks for tonight, 8 o'clock. We will we'll talk to you soon. Sixers in 6, right? Obviously.
Let's go for that. I want to get covering games.
Hey,
Let's
listen,
make it into happening.
if you want to win in 6, you have to lose 2 games.
Such a Philly thing to say.
All right, thanks, Ben.
Cheers, mate.
We'll see you.